Hello and welcome to Motivated Learning, presented by Visual Learning Solutions. I am your host, Buddy Broyles. Motivated Learning is a program created for the education and learning design community to raise awareness about the people and the reason for quality professional education training. Visual Learning Solutions is based here in Frisco, Texas. Our training facility is equipped with a television studio and a separate control room to support a range of video productions. We are a proud and active member and often a sponsor of our Dallas Area Association of Talent Development. As this show is live, be prepared to post any questions for our guest in the chat section as we will discuss them later in the program. Today I am very excited to welcome Richard Harmer, a certified crisis consultant. Richard is a recognized leader in crisis and corporate communications and digital media strategies. As a certified communication consultant, Richard is skilled in analyzing existing internal and external communications. I'd like to welcome Richard to the show. Richard, how are you, my friend?
Man, I'm doing great, buddy. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm so grateful, and I see what you're doing, and people are hungry for knowledge right now. And so what you're doing and your resources, it's pretty cool to see, buddy.
Well, I really appreciate your time, Richard, and I appreciate you joining us on our show. So let's kick it off with tell us and our audience about who you are and your current and past roles and what got you to where you are now. Kind of give us the long story of Richard Harmer.
I don't know if there's a long story. I'm still young, buddy.
Sure.
But yeah, as you mentioned before, I'm a certified crisis communications consultant, and that wasn't necessarily born out of something I was prepared to do right off the bat. I think over the last 20 years of working in marketing and public relations and media and digital strategies, it sort of evolved to that. And I took those next steps and got certified, and yeah, here I am. So I used to have a computer company based in Dallas, Texas, and then I eventually went to marketing and consulting. And I've been kind of doing that ever since, to be honest with you. And it's all I know. It's all I've ever done. The evolution of media has changed, as you know. You're in the business, buddy, and we've had to evolve with the constant change. And so, for me, I think how I got here was really learning everything tactically. And then when you could do things tactically, and you can also see it at a higher level, you start pinpointing what it is that you like. You start seeing all the different aspects of media and where you kind of want to be. And so here I am. 60% of my business is corporate and crisis communication. The other part is more internal communications and digital media strategies.
Excellent. So you had mentioned, there's changes over the industry over time. All the different industries, there's constant evolution happening. Tell me real quick, what is the past, I'd say year, it's longer than a year now. I mean, talk to me about your business, say, let's go back to, February or January, 2020 to current. What changes have you seen and that have impacted you based on the customers you serve?
For me personally, buddy, last year was an interesting year. I didn't really have the effects that a lot of people had. It did affect me I hate to say in a positive way, but and it did. I dealt with more crises last year than I've ever dealt with in my career. And I don't know if it was a sign of the times or it was a mixture of the sign of the times and what we were going through with COVID. Starting in February, actually, I got my first crisis of the year in February. And I can't really pinpoint why. I'm not really sure, to be candid, but nevertheless, 2020 was interesting for all of us. But the one thing that I think that we found was we have the ability at any level, at any scale, to create as much content as we want, right? So I think when you're positioned like yourself or someone like me, in a position to help facilitate that and tell the organizations and tell the companies how to do it, I think that's what was needed. And I happened to fall in the right place at the right time. As you know, you have this show, and a lot of things are born out of being uncomfortable. And I think a lot of us were uncomfortable.
Sure. Well, tell me a little bit about your processes. So, say from a crisis management and digital media and so on, what's a flow process? And talk to me about a specific crisis that you identify with, say, a large organization.
The types of crisis that I deal with on a regular basis, buddy, they vary. I mean, everything from, sexual harassment in the workplace to, a senior leader, um, doing something fraud, or, it
Yeah.
varies, right? But my process really is the same. Usually a crisis is born from a culture problem. It's not, it's a symptom of a larger problem, first of all. And whenever an organization grows, you could look at it this way: time and people, time and people will eventually fray the edges of the corporation, right? So
True.
if you're not buttoned up on the inside, and your culture's not buttoned up, and your DNA is not buttoned up, your brand and your organization is going to fall prey to some of the exterior things and interior things that can happen if it's in your industry or dealing with personnel. So the process that I actually have covers all of that. The first thing that most people fail to do in an organization is acknowledge that there's a crisis. And this is usually because as the organization grows, the checks and balances in place are not there. Usually they're missing. People will say things like, we have an open door policy. Well, buddy, if the last four people that went into HR got fired for complaining about something, guess what? You don't have an open door policy. Your culture will supersede policies and procedures all day long.
Right.
That's kind of where I start. We have to acknowledge the crisis. We have to acknowledge and tell everybody that the crisis is happening, and we also have to deal with the culture issues inside of the organization.
Right. And what I found interesting when we first talked prior to the show, weeks back actually, was one of the things that you do. And you understand most of the audience that follow us are instructional designers or have some relation to the training industry. And what you
Hmm.
do and the things you identify or help customers and companies identify the crisis, it's the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And in our case, the
Sure.
the people who are in crisis identify most of the times where the training is lacking, where the problems are in the
Right.
organization. So, like you mentioned, culture, the open door policy, which may or may not exist, that
Sure.
basically opens up all the different things in organization that really aren't being trained, that aren't in a manual or not being passed on through their different processes. So that's where someone like you comes in, is that you identify for the customer or your client, you open their eyes to all the different things that are challenging them, and that typically becomes the training that my team and other our
Right.
viewers and that's the best part, is if you do your job well and show them organizationally what you're doing wrong, especially when a crisis happens, because that when things, what is it, the best laid plans, like you can have it's some war thing, right? You can have the greatest
Right.
plans until the first bullet is fired, and that's when
Yep.
everybody just loses their minds, right? But a properly trained organization with a good, solid culture, and again, that's what we provide, and others like us. Those things don't impact the company as much when people are ready to go. I mean, just like firemen practice every day for a reason, because they know the
Sure.
crisis is coming. It's not if, it's when. And so
When?
that's what
Yes.
someone like you can do. You had mentioned an organization here in Dallas that you walked through. Talk to me about that process and what that exposed.
So you're talking about the Dallas Mavericks
That's correct.
organization.
That's right. Walk us through
Yeah,
that.
so in 2018, most people know that the Dallas Mavericks had a bit of a media problem. Well, through the hiring, Mark Cuban hired Cent Marshall, who basically changed the organization. She didn't just change the organization; she changed the culture, buddy. And that was a big shift. It was a paradigm shift on how people deal with a crisis, right? A lot of times a crisis will expose one or two things, either a weakness in an organization, okay, or a complete culture problem. So, for instance, the what the Dallas Mavericks had to deal with was sexual harassment in the workplace and a whole host of other issues, right? So what they did is they said, okay, we're not only going to make this and fix this, we're going to make it a cause. Mark Cuban did not buy the Dallas Mavericks in order to make sexual harassment and all of the and equity or equality in the workplace. That's not why he bought the organization. He just liked basketball. But guess what his cause ended up being? So we have the saying, apologies are expensive. Apologies are very expensive, but you also have to be willing to take on the cause that gets exposed. Or,
Yes.
so the crisis that gets exposed, buddy. And so for someone like you who creates content on a regular basis, that I look at one of two ways. It's an insurance policy, but it's also a way to talk about your culture. It's a way to communicate. I'm a communicator. That's what I do for a living, buddy. That is all I do. And it doesn't matter if it's internal, it doesn't matter if it's external, it doesn't matter. A lot of times we create videos and these types of things, just like what you have here, for internal purposes as well. It allows people to be a part of what the organization is doing. Very few organizations actually see it that way. They think that it's just some sort of marketing tool or they're doing it for a potential client or, whatever that is, right? And, you may think, well, yeah, we make boxes or we do, something else that most people aren't interested in. But you have to remember one thing. You're doing it for the people inside of the organization as much as you're doing it for the people outside of the organization. We tend to forget that. Then when a crisis happens and you have nothing to go to, you don't have any content, you don't have any videos, people have no idea what your culture and what your brand actually looks like. They see a logo, they see a product, they see a service, but they don't have that feeling that you get. By creating content on a regular basis, you can get a feel of of the company's culture. And it says, wow, they've been doing this for so long. They're experts in their field. They really care about their people. They really care about their clients. They really care about the products. They really care about how they serve. Because at the end of the day, that's what you do. You provide a service, even if you're selling a product or a widget or whatever that is. And so
Right.
we have to remember that now everybody today, everybody has the ability to do this. Technology has come so far in just 10 years. I remember creating video, 13 or 14 years ago for nonprofit organizations, and they just thought it was just the biggest deal. But buddy, everybody's doing it now. So if you're not ahead, you're only going to get behind, and it's only going to take you one crisis to fall behind. And if you have more than two people in your organization, it's going to happen. At some point, it's going to happen.
Right. And another thing we've observed, and you have as well, because you work with C-level, high-level people in the organization, is one of the first things you have to do is remind them, and some of them get it. It's the best thing when you walk in to an organization that they get it they understand from the top down that the audience isn't necessarily the C-suite. The audience is the people who need, and literally the audience are the people who, when the crisis happens, the people that don't know what to do. Now, C-suite may
Right.
know, upper level management may know, but if it's not getting down to the people who are literally driving the forklift or processing the information, or definitely the PR people, if they're not
Right.
if they don't understand the culture, then there's systemic failure, right? So how do you get ahead of
Right.
that is first talking to the leadership and making sure that they agree, and they often do, that they're not their audience. We have to identify the audience first and who needs that information. And unfortunately, crisis situations definitely reveal who that audience is. The people who aren't doing their jobs well, the people who are walking
Right.
into HR and getting fired because they didn't know,
Right.
the policy or culture, or
Right.
very unaware of what the motives were for the business. So it's really important to to make sure, like you said, and now, really good point. Creating media is so easy. It's attainable for anybody. You don't need necessarily someone like us, but my kids can do it on their phones, and they can generate, they can create their own YouTube channel just like that. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying, don't let that be the hurdle. Let it, make sure that it's the message that is usually the hardest part. Get the message right. The media is easy. So I want to move on real quick, Richard, unless you have a follow-up for that. Go ahead.
Well, you know what? You just said a word, Buddy, that I want to address. You said systemic, right? As a crisis person, whenever I go into an organization and they said this event happened, this person did this, or something happened, right? Buddy, I can isolate an incident, I can isolate an event, I can isolate a person, but what I can't isolate and remove is systemic issues inside of an organization. If you don't have the proper training, if you don't have the proper dashboards to see what's happening inside of the organization, you don't have the proper KPIs set up in your organization, you don't have the proper measurement tools in the organization, something is going to come amiss inside of the system. And it's going to keep happening over and over and over.
I think we might. Oh, there you are.
So
we got you back.
That's the thing that there. So that's one of the things that I can't isolate is a systemic issues inside of the organization. That's going to have to come from within. That's going to have to come from inside of the organization.
Well, I think, and you made a really good point, Richard, is you can't just put the videos out there. You can't just put the training out there. It has to be measured. And that's where companies invest in. And there are so many options now in learning management systems, or at least someone who's tracking the training, encouraging a leader, could be HR, or someone who is making sure that not only is the information available, but they're actually taking it. It's not just to check a box too. So when training is created poorly or information is distributed poorly with a poor message, it's not consumed. Whereas the other side of that is, if you design it well, you design it to be tracked, you build a system that has, like you mentioned, a dashboard so you can see who's going through it, and even if possible, and it's available now, gamify it, make a leaderboard, make it team-based, create cohorts that are going through their training, make it interesting, because sometimes the content isn't, but at least make it, put some personality into it, make it a team building thing. And there's so many options that are available now, and so many of our audience, they are trying to create this content for their employers and the companies they work for and build training for, and we're all pushing the same thing. Create the media, but make sure they're consuming it, and make sure you're tracking it. Because then, like you said, when a crisis happens, you can look at all of your data and say, well, wait, we've been doing all these things right. Let's identify where the problem is. And it may just be a certain department, and you can look on the tracking system and say, no one in that department took the training. So then that's an easy solve. Talk to that manager. What's going on? Bob or Susie or whatever. None of your people are trained, and now we're in crisis. So, but you can't know that if you just have a YouTube channel. Here's all the training, go take it. So it's like,
and those tools
doesn't solve the problem.
Buddy, those tools are available and affordable for all organizations. I mean, that's really the key. Those monitoring systems, are out there. There's tons of them. People are creating them every single day. And with AI, it's happening faster and faster and faster to where you can pinpoint a problem.
That's correct. So moving forward, Richard, so obviously you're great at what you do. You have a real passion for it. Let's talk about what motivates you. What gets you out of bed in the morning? What are your mantras? What are your processes that I'm going to accomplish this for my customers? Let's talk about you as a person and what gives you your go.
Purpose. My purpose, Buddy, has always been to help other organizations succeed. There may be something I say or something I do or a plan I implement or a strategy, and purpose is quite literally gets me up in the morning because I get to help somebody else, right? That's my purpose. A lot of times I don't know the end result, and after that, I'm an executive advisor to a few guys, and I help write speeches and talks. And if they have the ability to reach people, their audience, their employees, whomever, I have no idea what the outcome is going to be. I don't have to know that. My Why I get up every single morning is because I believe that communication is the foundation to change. I think that how you deliver a message and how it's received is the most important thing in an organization. I help companies I help get companies on the platforms that they need and get the right message to their people, whatever that looks like. That's what I do best. A lot of times, it could be as simple as, a lot of IT or a lot of IT departments are siloed out, right? They create these silos inside of the organization. But what we don't, most people don't realize is how important IT is to the rest of the organization. IT is a vital part of keeping the organization moving forward. But if you don't effectively communicate with IT and understand them, and IT doesn't understand what the department's end goal is, there's going to be a disconnect. So someone like me comes in and I help engage the two departments and help facilitate that relationship, buddy. And I see it over and over and over again. I see that these silos inside of these large organizations just sort of happen over time. Again, time and people. The edges get frayed a little bit. So if you can actually bring it all back together through technology, through things like this, through training, through video, through whatever that looks like, and monitor all that and track everything, you can actually create a smaller circle of 10,000 employees to where everyone is getting the same information and everybody understands everybody else's why. Buddy, that's huge. Communication is why I wake up. I promise you, it's a passion of mine. I believe it wholeheartedly. I read 50 to 60 books every single year, just focused on this one niche, just this one thing, how human behavior works and how it affects everyone inside of an organization. How you communicate truly, truly matters. And
Yeah.
that's really why I give up. Why I get up. I have that purpose. I have that drive to help that. And I don't know why. I don't know what started that. I couldn't pinpoint a specific reason, but here I am, excited to
Right.
get up every single day. I love it.
Yeah, and Richard, you had mentioned communication. I know you have a podcast that I believe it's weekly. Tell us about that.
Right. So I have a podcast with a friend of mine, Rocky Hare, who is a attorney. He's an entertainment lawyer and personal injury attorney here in Dallas, Texas, and it's called Rock and Rich Uncomfortable. When we started this podcast, we thought that our conversations would be interesting. We thought that if people could take away something from the podcast and from our guests, well, that would be amazing. Because again, communication is key. We wanted to do that. We talk about uncomfortable subjects. We talk about with uncomfortable people. We talk about everything from death to, when Jason Witten, he was one of our guests, how he made it, how he was in an abusive household, and how he became one of the most one of the greatest tight ends in NFL history, and he's amazing. And through that, what we didn't think about, buddy, is how it would actually affect us. I am learning more with each guest than I ever thought possible. It's changing the way that I look at people, and it's changing the way that I do business, quite honestly. And I think it's an authentic view of how to actually succeed. Not all this cover bull crap and not all this. We're talking an authentic, real view of how to succeed. Perseverance, man, it's been a reoccurring theme in the podcast. And there's perseverance, and then there's relationships. Relationships come up over and over and over again. The ability to connect. But connection doesn't always have to be in person. Connection can be through a podcast. Connection be what you're doing, what we're doing right here. That
Right.
one-on-one, that personal connection is really what pushes us all forward. And buddy,
Well,
during COVID, we got exposed. We had to catch up. We just realized we have all of these tools right here at our disposal, and we weren't using them like we should in 2019. We need to be doing this and seeing each other face to face. It's not or, it's and. We
Right.
need to make sure we solidify our relationships.
Yeah, I
So that's
believe.
really why I started the podcast.
Yeah, that's terrific. Give us the name of the podcast one more time, Richard.
It's Rock and Rich Uncomfortable, and you could download it and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And
Terrific, terrific.
next week we have a great guest, and Jason Witten's been on the show, and a gentleman that did 35 years in prison, a friend of mine, Gene McGuire. His story is
Wow.
remarkable. It changed my
Yeah,
life. 35 years in
terrific.
prison, and the tools that he used in prison to survive and to find freedom. Yes, he found freedom in prison, are the
Wow,
same tools that we can use in real life. It's not comfortable, but I promise you it'll change your life.
terrific. Well, thank you, Richard. I really enjoyed speaking with you. Any final words or advice for someone, say the younger Richard starting his career, pathways you would take, knowing that communication is so important, and identifying the different ways to reach your audience?
Whatever it is that you want to do in life, your first goal needs to be to point your ship in that direction. Most people, they don't think about it like this. I was talking to my little cousin the other day. She's 16 years old. She's got a 4.3 GPA. She just needs to steer her ship in the direction that she wants to go in. She talked to me about, she was going to get a job at, a barbecue place. Well, she wants to do finance. Buddy, I'm going to tell you right now, she could get an internship at a CPA, find a mentor that will help get her pointed in the right direction in the field that she wants to go in. What we fail to do when we're younger, and what I would tell my younger self, get pointed in the direction that you want to go sooner. Find a mentor, find your purpose in that industry. Because I promise you, if you can get pointed in that direction, your circles become smaller, your relationships become tighter, and you start really getting involved in the industry itself, whatever that is, whatever industry that is. If you want to be in politics, get involved with the local chamber of commerce, get involved with the community efforts, get involved with little small community social things that are people doing on it constantly, networking. So that's my advice, is really just don't set your goal so high to be the president or whatever. Get on a path to be the
Right.
president. Don't worry about all that
Terrific.
other stuff.
Right. Well, Richard, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, and obviously your insights and your position in the business. And like I said, one of the value that you bring to this show is you're on the front lines of identifying what ultimately becomes training programs. So someone has to
Right.
point it out. And like I said, unfortunately, crisis it does that, but you help guide them on the path to educating their entire organization in some case. So I really appreciate you being on the show today.
Absolutely, buddy. I'm a big fan of yours. I love what you're doing, and I think that HR companies, every HR departments can utilize what you're doing in so many ways, buddy. And they need to take advantage of this, because they're not in video production. They don't do this stuff for a living.
True.
But here they have
Right.
access to a company like yours that can create these training programs, that can do this stuff internally and externally. And they need to take advantage of it, because it's a big deal, and it needs to. I'm telling you, it needs to happen, because it can prevent me from them hiring me. I promise.
True. Get it right. So basically, it's apple a day keeps the Richard away. But in this case, proper training,
Right.
keeps Richard at bay. But obviously, when they need you,
That's
they'll know
right.
how to find you. So excellent.
That's
Well,
right.
thanks again.
Thank you, buddy.
So you bet. For the rest of you out there, please reach out if you have any questions about this show using our social media. You can obviously find us here on Facebook at Visual Learning Solutions. Email us at any time, info@visuallearningsolutions.com. We're on Twitter. You can always give us a call. We're happy to hear from you. And then follow us on Instagram, because we're always posting something new. As for Visual Learning Solutions, we provide services such as instructional design, e-learning, instructional course development, and so much more, including video production, both here in our studio and out in the field, such as your corporate location or event center. We have lots of relationships with different studios and people here in DFW and all across the nation. Also, if you wish to host a similar show to this one, obviously different, everything different, branded to your needs, we can help from developing the concept to set and show design, along with full production and marketing of your product so you can reach your audience. So thank you again for watching, and we'll hope you'll tune in or even consider joining us as a guest on a future program. So thanks again for watching Motivated Learning, and have a really wonderful day. You literally wrote the book. You started with the first draft and spent countless hours pouring your wealth of knowledge onto the pages, and published. Well done. Now take another step to reach a new, larger audience by converting your book into online training. Our learning design team can show you how to go digital with an instructional course based on your book. We can help you increase your revenue on both book sales and online training, and increase your potential. You've completed the hard part. Now take the next step. Let us show you how.